We have a great opportunity to spend some time with Blaine, who is the CEO of thePlatform. And as I'm sure all of you know, thePlatform has been expanding very rapidly from its roots here in the United States, and now is playing a global role in facilitating the distribution of video in IP format for every conceivable kind of customer, from the traditional service providers to the programmers to the content owners. Ian, I guess since we last talked, so much has changed so rapidly with respect to some of the agendas we're seeing, like with BT suddenly jumping into a pure OTT kind of mode of doing its premium services. And of course, so many other players now looking at doing premium over OTT, and then of course so many of the programmers trying to expand their reach. Why don't you give us just kind of an overview of how you've seen things evolving in the past, let's say, 6 months?
Yeah, happy to. I think the biggest, most obvious trend is the great wave towards mobile consumption. I think that is pushing decisions across the board in terms of the way that carriage deals are modeled, the businesses that content owners think about. It's being driven by consumer adoption of mobile devices that are premium consumption devices for video. And some of the things that you'll see as a result of that are bigger, richer content deals that incorporate big libraries across all kinds of devices in and out of the home. And it puts pressure on the entire ecosystem because it means more content, more places, more quickly if you really want to leverage the benefits of having the access to the content. And the consumer demand is just going up.
Are you seeing the licensing processes open up to where this is a feasible, just normal way of doing business?
I think we've seen the front end of it for sure. I mean, if you look at recent deals with, for example, Comcast and Disney, it's a very long-term deal. It includes current and back library of content as well as linear channels, and it provides access across a plethora of devices, both in and out of the home. And I think that is a very good bellwether of how things will go, which does break down a lot of the barriers of access, and it makes it a technology issue to make sure that you're modeling it all correctly and then enabling it for the consumer.
But as you said, it gets into quantities of content and quantities of distribution points and targets on the distribution that kind of exceed anything people were looking at just a year ago.
Yep.
So how does that affect you, because you're trying to keep up with these demands?
Yeah, well, like I said, it puts pressure, but it's a positive kind because it's more of the things we like to do. But it also has brought up some interesting inflection points. So as you see an increase in the amount of content, the number of files, the number of places they need to go, and the number of devices that need to be supported, our customers are facing some interesting inflection points. Do they expand their internal infrastructure of storage, of transcoding, of delivery in order to meet these needs, or do they start to think about transitioning towards cloud-based services, outsourced services? And I think the clear indicator right now in the market is that that's becoming more and more of an interesting avenue.
Well, it's interesting because you started out offering the cloud option, but
Yep.
being very flexible and
Yep.
saying you don't have to do it that way, but they're kind of coming to you anyway.
Yeah, so I mean, our view is that the logic has always belonged in the cloud, and that's what MPX really is something that really manages the complexity of all of this and is a powerful engine to drive workflow across this ecosystem. What we've seen now is a really interesting opportunity to increase the efficiency of doing all that by not only taking MPX and putting in the cloud, but actually building together some adjacencies around it that make the whole process faster, more cost-effective, and just easier to manage.
How does that happen? I mean, you know, obviously the model you've had and worked with for years has been sufficient to the needs. What about what you're doing and I gather what you're saying is bringing more of the infrastructure into the workflow environment in the cloud. And so in doing that, how do you explain to people that this makes a difference from them just continually adding to their own infrastructures?
Well, I think the differences are, one, it's just logistically simpler. You're going to have new formats coming on all the time. You're going to have new devices to support. You're going to have new outlets. And trying to keep up with that is not necessarily something that the big content owners want to keep doing. They really want someone like us to take responsibility for that complexity. And I think that the cloud has matured to the place where it's feasible. It's secure enough, it is fast enough, and it is certainly scalable enough to handle the needs in a more efficient, cost-effective way. And the real trick is that I think people are seeing the benefit of tightening the bundling of these things together. So while they can be loosely coupled, and still today, you can use all of these interchangeably within premise or within the cloud, anywhere you want, what we're arguing, and I think making a good argument for, is to say that you're going to get better efficiency by tightening these things together and actually placing them together. So to that end, we took the big plunge by naming what we're talking about, and we have a new product coming out called MPX Accelerate, and it's designed to do that. It's designed to accelerate workflow.
So this means that you are putting together some significant data centers in different parts of the world to accommodate all this content?
We have significant data centers throughout the world to house MPX and all of the workflow that it manages, and so it wasn't a hard decision to say, hey, let's add to that storage, let's add to that robust transcoding, and let's add to that the ability to originate content to CDNs.
Now this puts you in a position then of being able to work from so-called mezzanine files that are, you know, from one point, as opposed to being scattered all over the place. And I mean, one of the big challenges, for example, for service providers when this whole multi-screen thing took off and they realized they had to get out to things like the iPhone was, oh, that's not just a very small resolution. Oh, by the way, it's suddenly got to have HD resolution to it. They weren't ready for that.
Yep.
So now there's a difference in terms of the quality capabilities that come from this more centralized approach?
I don't think it's a difference in quality. Whether you go to a mezzanine in your own infrastructure or in the cloud, you get the same benefits. The argument here is by placing them in the cloud and placing them next to transcoding that is very expandable, you have more options when it comes to handling a new inbound request, and you're going to get more speed. Also, I'd say, in our experience, and I think the experience of the industry, having mezzanine available is going to result in a higher quality, lower bit rate file for delivery to your customer, which means cost savings. It's going to cost less to store that. It's going to cost less to stream it. And so we always want to be able to go back to mezzanine or high definition as often as we can, and that's part of why we're offering this, is to say let's just put it here so we can always go to this. When you tell us there's the next thing to do, we're going to go to that source.
So then the quality is improved to the extent that people weren't doing that in their own environments and trying to take shortcuts, drawing it from a mezzanine somewhere and doing the transcoding at a lower resolution to get it out to the smaller devices or whatever.
Well, I think that has been the case in a lot of scenarios where you can't always find the mezzanine, or you don't always have easy access to the mezzanine, and so you start with a reasonably high bitrate file and encode from there. And inherently, it takes a higher bit rate to reach the same quality level as you could get from mezzanine.
So, what do you have any kind of sense of what this adds up to as far as, say, percentage on a given stream, bandwidth savings or anything like that? Is it a bandwidth saving kind of thing?
It is, and the exact numbers are really impossible to nail down. It's a range, and the reason for that is that if you're talking about high motion sports versus me sitting here talking, it's a lot different in terms of the savings you can get. In addition, I'd say it depends on the encoding technology you're using. There's been some pretty amazing breakthroughs by some companies to really get compression better and better. So if you optimize all those things, I think you can get pretty significant savings.
So where does this leave you in addressing these other needs that go with transcoding, which is streaming the stuff out, and how that gets handled? Well,
so if you take mezzanine, you put smart encoding next to it, which we've done, and you make that elastic so it can grow and shrink as you need it as a customer. The next logical thing is to say, well, how do you make it really efficient to get this onto a content delivery network? And today, that's generally done by saying, well, we're going to go ahead and put this content in the origin services of that content delivery network, and that works fine. It works great. But we're seeing an interesting trend today, which is that increasingly, especially our bigger customers, are contemplating using more than one CDN. In fact, they are using more than one CDN today. And one of the things we recognized is that as they do that, if Origin is with CDN, they're actually paying for Origin with each additional CDN they use. And that seemed like not a very cost-efficient thing to do. And so we, as part of this offering, have stood up Origin services so that now you can take a mezzanine, transcode, place on Origin, and make it available to multiple CDNs. And we'll integrate with both the big ones that everybody uses, but also private CDNs.
And the CDN, people are willing to play that way?
Well, CDNs can pull from their own Origin services, or a customer's Origin services, or a third party's Origin services. So I think this is not a new paradigm here.
So they're cooperative on this point, as long as they're getting the business.
Yeah, and we're not looking to interdict and change their business. We're looking to make things more efficient and then support delivery through them.
Now, of course, with all that comes all these different DRM formats, protection, and policies that have to be enforced, often not just DRM specific to a device, but then policies that are specific to a device. And across multiple devices, it might take the same DRM. How are you addressing that piece of it?
With a lot of time and energy, because it is so complicated today. Our view of the world is that policy is something that should be abstract, meaning that it should be something you can apply logically to whatever asset you're interested in applying it to, or collection of assets, so that you can set windows of availability, geographic restrictions, number of plays in some cases, and you want that logically separate from the actual enforcement, so that you can have flexibility. Because, as you said, we may want to set policy once, but may need to enforce it with multiple DRM systems or security systems. And so our view is make it very clean and easy to model what you want, to enforce the restrictions or opportunities that are made available through a carriage deal or through your own business model, and then tie that to a DRM system on a device basis or service basis as needed. And so we've done the integrations with the DRM systems, but policy we really view as a central modeling thing within our own system.
And so you've abstracted that to where people on MPX can readily set the policies they want and then execute those policies on DRMs by virtue of how you've integrated with those DRMs.
That's right, and you have to have the brains inside of the system to know which to use when on all that stuff. And recently we've added in support for subscriptions. So via commerce services, you can now actually model an analog to a pay TV subscription within our system. So I think we're now covering every feasible window of delivery through the life cycle of a piece of content.
One of the things that's happened that you mentioned, mobile, has been very interesting, is the introduction of broadcast on mobile. In the IP domain, which is really multicast. You're leveraging the fact that it's much easier to work off individual cell sites to support a multicast environment than what the cable guys have to deal with if they wanted to do multicast. But that's a huge bandwidth saver. Are you supporting that, number one? And number two, are you seeing an uptake on that from the mobile side?
We're seeing a general uptake in both live linear, which is like a 24/7 channel, and live events. Now, with respect to whether it's multicast or not, our system can handle either, and we model them very much the same, because that's in some ways a layer deeper in the network than our system. And so you model a multicast stream, you put it in our system, you're off to the races. You can do the same with unicast. But the broader issue is that, yes, carriage deals are starting to include linear channels on IP as part of their definition, and certainly, as evidenced by the Olympics and other big events, reach to mobile devices is becoming a really important thing. And so I think we're going to see a lot of growth in both of those. And we've invested a lot in the last 6 months to really make sure that from MPX you can model live and live events as easily as you can on-demand content. Well,
it sounds like you've kind of eliminated one of the barriers to total crazy disruption in this marketplace, so congratulations.
Well, thank you.
Thanks a lot, Ian.
Yep, always a pleasure.